from the heart of Dubai. This is Sports Unhinged with Mohammed Hamiz.
And we are on. Hello and welcome to Sports Unhinged. My name is Mohammed Hamiz, and however you might be listening to us today, whether it's SoundCloud, iTunes, your Apple Podcast app, Stitcher, Facebook, or YouTube, we are glad that you can be here with us. Today is a special treat for all MMA fans because we're going to be dedicating the full show to mixed martial arts. And what's better is that we have a guest who's been in the fight business for many, many years, used to be the senior vice president in One Championship, formerly known as One Fighting Championship, and is now the founder of Haraka Sports Management Agency. Az, welcome to the show.
Pleasure to be here, Hamiz. Good to see you again.
Now, obviously, there's been a lot going on in the UFC, but before we get into that, just tell us a little bit about yourself and what your experience has been in the fight business over the last few years.
Yeah, I know this is dedicated to MMA and UFC for the next hour, but I can't start without saying North London is red. Arsenal, finally, we've done it. We beat Tottenham, so I've been gloating for 3 days now.
So are you in the Wenger in or Wenger out?
It doesn't change anything for me. I'm still out.
You're still out.
I'm still Wenger out, but I celebrate the win. It's a huge win for Arsenal, and I'm delighted with that one.
Excellent, excellent. So we've got quite a few things to cover today. Obviously, we're going to talk about the UFC Shanghai event that's coming up. We're going to also go back and look at UFC 217, which was one of the best main events I've ever seen.
Yeah.
But let's start with some of your activities right now. You've set up a sports agency representing a few up-and-coming UFC fighters. What is that like? Take us a bit inside the business.
Look, it's a fascinating one because my background is the corporate world, right? And my passion has obviously been sports and football and boxing, being from the UK. But MMA is something I gradually became very, very fond of and followed massively when I moved to Asia a number of years ago. Not so much of a boxing region, but mixed martial arts is practiced throughout the region. You're never more than 1 degree of separation away from someone who's practicing a form of martial arts, whether it's Muay Thai, kickboxing, jiu-jitsu, judo, karate. So the reality is it fueled my desire because I saw completely different acceptance and execution of combat sports other than the Queensberry rules, which I grew up watching. So I got more and more interested in this stuff, and I got interested in it from a technical point of view because there's an inherent beauty attached to each martial art, and in this wonderful sport that we all follow, MMA or mixed martial arts, blending all those different things together. There's just some, there's a ballet around this. There's a savage ballet of MMA, right? So I got involved from a technical perspective and more so from a business point of view, really trying to understand, how this business could become monetized and start to grow according to the kind of estimates we felt were supporting the growth of this kind of business, right? And the timing was right. So I got involved in it from that point of view. The fighters are people I always had an affinity to. Mm-hmm. They were the people at the end of the day who faced the truth. And I used to say this at the time, these guys train and train and train, and they train for this one event or two events a year, and that literally keeps their livelihoods alive, right? And it's their moment to face their own reality and their own truth and create something big, a legacy, a huge legacy for themselves and their families. I mean, there's the honesty that some of these guys have in the way they approach the sport. It's something I just got completely wrapped up in. So for me, when I stopped looking at it purely from a business corporation point of view, I wanted to help out the people that really do build this sport up, and that's the fighters at the end of the day. So what Haraka is, as you know, being a native Arabic speaker, it's a word for movement. Right. So essentially what Haraka for me is it's movement through movement. So we are 100% partnership based. So I am partnered all over the world from Europe, the US and Asia, have access to every single UFC star you can think of. And my job really is to help these guys to continue to develop their brands and their pedigree. And for those of them looking to establish a footprint in the Middle East, Africa or Asia, is to give them the advice, the mentoring, and the tools to effectively build cross-cultural brands that allows them to become relevant outside of the US or England, as the case may be, right?
And just speaking of that, we've seen that the popularity of the sport in the Middle East has gone through the roof in the last
crazy,
few years. It's really become... And I started watching the UFC in UFC 112 that took place in Abu Dhabi with Anderson Silva versus Damian Maia. That was literally the first time, but then...
When was that? 2014, wasn't it?
Yeah, no, it was, I think, before that.
Maybe before.
A while before that.
Right.
They had a fight night, I think, in 2014
right,
with
the one.
Roy Nelson and Minotauro Nogueira. The one with Roy Nelson knocking out Nogueira. I actually went to that one as well. But that's where I got into the sport. And then when you go back and you look at the history and how it came up from the Gracie days and, you know, it just evolved into this huge, it's the fastest growing sport. It's an animal,
fastest growing sport. You look at every meaningful metric attached to the sport and the metrics off the radar. You know, the reality is the sports that have done this properly and done it well are football. The US sports clearly do a good job, although ratings are obviously on the slide at the moment, but those are for a number of different reasons, I think, not just what many people are saying.
Right.
I think, but the fact is that the US properties have monetized NFL, NBA, the baseball league very, very well. Now, what the rest of the world did very well was football, or soccer, as many people call it, I guess. But that became a huge business property and broadcast property. But, you know, at the last financial crisis, 2007, what sport would you see growing? I mean, boxing doesn't have the attraction it had once upon a time.
And it's basically because it's still all in the hands of the promoters.
It is, but there's no stars. I mean, look, I grew up as a boxing guy in the UK. MMA started to kick off really a few years ago, but you go back to the 70s, I'm giving it away here, but 70s and 80s, I grew up, you know, Hagler, Hearns, Duran, Muhammad Ali, last tail end of his career, but I grew up watching Mike Tyson, and who you know, my fondest memories were getting up at 3-4 o'clock in the morning with my dad and my brother to watch a Tyson fight. Yeah. You know, you'd get up to watch Mike Tyson fight,
absolutely.
right? And Lennox Lewis and Evander Holyfield and all those guys. I wouldn't do that now.
I know. I mean, I'm a bit younger than you are, so I used to wake up to watch the Prince Nassim fights. And
massive Nas fan.
He fought a few times in London. We got lucky. We got some tickets to go watch him live. So that was he was a bit of he wasn't a star. I would say he was kind of like a passing meteor that kind of fizzled out very quickly. He had
an incredible career, and the only thing you look back on is how big that career could have been.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Because
what if,
he was such a talented guy. The natural power he had, he was unorthodox, threw shots from ridiculous angles, but charisma off the radar. You know, this guy was unbelievable.
But he kind of became a victim of his own success after a while. It got to his head.
They always do, and that's why there's a need for strong management agencies, because at the end of the day, you know, anyone needs mentoring. Everyone needs help, mentoring, advice. And the tragic thing about our fight sports, in my experience, is that success can come very quickly. If you're good, success can come very quickly. And sometimes, and most of the time, the money will come very quickly as a consequence. And if you're not prepared to manage that, and you haven't got the right team around you, you're going to make the wrong decisions. One wrong decision after another. And before you know it, it's a very short career. So it's all over.
What advice would you have for some of these up-and-coming fighters? Obviously, when you're representing them, a lot of it goes into advising them on how to handle their careers. You're usually negotiating their contracts and that kind of stuff. So you're in the money side of things. What kind of advice do you give these up-and-coming fighters?
The tagline or moniker for Haraka is authentic and audacious. And that's something we look at for the talent that we bring on board. You know, authenticity is really important. So always be who you are and be grounded. You know, for me, humility is a big, important part of it. Selling seats and selling tickets, we all understand that's part of the game, right? But at the end of the day, that the humility part of it is really, really important, staying grounded, staying focused, and audacious. You know, always look to be a better version of yourself. You know, if you start to settle for the norm and start to settle for, you know, average results, then you should expect an average career.
It is a brutal sport to be in. You have to be right, not just physically, but mentally the whole time.
I think it's 90% mental, to be honest. I really do. I think if you look at some of the people that are killing it at the moment And obviously the major one, the biggest name in combat sports right now is obviously Conor, right?
Right.
The guy's self-belief is ridiculous. It really is. I mean,
he almost defeats the opponent mentally before they ever get into the octagon.
He's the mental warfare that he adopts going into a fight is systematic. And like you say, he breaks people down before they actually get into the cage with him. But that's one aspect of it. His self-belief in himself is second to none. And that's a major component of anyone who wants to be successful, not only in a cage or a ring, but in life in itself. You've got to trust yourself. You've got to believe in yourself. Speaking
of Conor, do you think that, the success that he's had is starting to get to his head? We saw the incident that happened in Bellator recently. There's a lot of conspiracy theories flying around. I've heard some people say that he's trying to get banned on purpose to avoid Tony Ferguson.
Conor McGregor doesn't need to do that.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? So that one, I don't believe it. Was it the right thing to do? Obviously not.
Yeah.
Right? Because first and foremost, the ring or the cage in this case, it's locked for a reason when two fighters get in there. And when the cage door is locked, the referee has governance as to what goes on in that cage. And the number one priority is fighter safety. Otherwise, it'll be anarchy. Anyone can jump in, jump out, all kinds of craziness would happen. So it wasn't the right thing to do. And I think in hindsight, there's obviously a regrettable thing that happened.
Yeah, and he did put out a statement saying the same. He did. It was an emotional night. It's his good friend of his that had just won the fight. Obviously, there's purported history with Goddard going back to the UFC in Poland, but it shouldn't have happened. But is he doing it to get out of a fight with anyone? No, I don't think so. I don't think so either.
I just think it's exuberance. He's obviously coming off a massive high, taking part in the most expensive fight in history, right? Which was audacious and ridiculous in itself to do that, to just get into the ring with.
And that goes back to the thing, because with the amount of money that he's made in the Mayweather fight, it's incredible. I mean, going back to the UFC, I don't think that he'll ever get paid anything close to that. So he has to go back to MMA for the love of the sport at the moment.
Right.
Because I think he's made enough money. He still make a lot of money. He'll probably go for 20-25 million a fight minimum.
Yeah.
But the only thing is, after making that much money with Mayweather, he could easily just go the boxing route and start trash talking and calling out Canelo or I mean,
it's a good point you make. I don't see it happening, and I don't want to see it happen, to be honest, because Conor, first and foremost, is a mixed martial artist. I think let's take the Mayweather fight for what it was. It was a one-off event, but I just give him a ton of credit to take that fight to begin with, to literally disarm yourself 90% and focus on one skill set and take a fight against what many people consider as the greatest defensive fighter in history.
Absolutely, yeah.
It just shows the self-belief of this guy to talk himself into that fight. And then to hold himself, I felt, very credibly for 10 rounds.
Yeah, I mean, he did okay, but you can also tell that it was Mayweather's strategy to let him get the first few rounds and then kind of turn it on.
I've heard this from so many people.
That's what I think. I mean,
yeah. Look, there's some credence to that comment, but for me, it doesn't wash. Whether it was his strategy or not, you are in your comfort zone. You're a boxer. Something you've done, and you've been unbeaten for 49 fights. You've got a guy 0-0.
Yeah.
Let's just let that
he shouldn't qualify to even be your sparring partner.
You should be knocking him out. I don't want to hear this stuff that I want you to tire him out, and you should not have let this fight go past the first round. Sorry. So for Conor to take the first...
That's a good argument. That's a good argument.
Because I'll tell you what, if the shoe's on the other foot, that's not going past a minute.
Oh, of course. No. He'll choke him out in the first 10 seconds. They were saying it'll take him a couple of seconds to get over to him.
Yeah.
Maybe 2 seconds to put him down, and 3 seconds and he's out. That's it. 10 seconds, you're done.
So I wouldn't like to see him carry on down that route, but obviously Paulo Malignaggi's been talking quite a lot since that. I don't think that generates anywhere near the amount of pay-per-view interest that the Mayweather fight. I think they did probably 6.5-7 million buys in there, which is off the radar. Yeah. So for me, I don't even think Conor's got close to his full potential as a mixed martial artist. The guy's 28, 29.
I mean, if you look at his age, 29 years old, maybe. I mean, I don't think he's even hit his prime yet.
Nah, he's physically, I think he's 3 years away from hitting his physical prime.
Right.
But I don't know whether a lot of people sort of understand this, but he's he's an incredible student of the sport. You know, he is actually a proper martial artist. You know, he studies his stuff, and no one puts in the amount of work he's put in.
It's not an accident, because every time, you know, he run his mouth, he's backed it up. Yeah. And nobody expected him to beat Mayweather anyway.
He's focused to the point of obsession.
If you're Dana White, do you give him a share of the UFC? Because that's what he's been asking for.
That's what he's been asking for, exactly. Yeah, I mean, there's two ways I would answer that, right? One is from a pure athlete perspective. I think it sets a very dangerous precedence to do that, right? But I can understand why he's saying that. But from a business perspective, I also think the UFC, from the point they sold for 4.2 billion, the timing was brilliant on the sale, because since then they've had no Ronda Rousey, they've had no Conor,
no John Jones.
It's so you can see from the pay-per-views, they've been hurt quite badly. So you might find, you know, he's got himself into a great situation now when it comes to renegotiating with them, because he's got all the leverage. He's the marquee draw, and they've had the whole year to try and identify a successor or a range of other A-list fighters, which hasn't quite happened for a number of reasons. I thought Cody Garbrandt would make the jump up this year, but obviously injuries got in the way of that, and then obviously the fight with TJ recently. I just haven't seen anyone take over the mantle as a pay-per-view king. They don't have it. They don't have a pay-per-view king other than Conor.
Yeah. All right, so let's talk about the upcoming event in Shanghai, UFC Shanghai. You're going to be there. You're going to be traveling there in a couple of days.
Yes.
Bisping taking the fight on such short notice, it just makes me more of a fan. To be just a couple of weeks removed from a fight with Georges St. Pierre and being put to sleep. First of all, refusing to tap out during that choke and going to sleep, and to take a fight on short notice. And it's not just against anyone. Gastelum is quite a tough opponent. I mean, stylistically, it's going to be a tough match, because I think Gastelum has the speed advantage. I think he has faster hands. But Bisping is one of those fighters that you can never rule him out of a fight.
Look, just to answer your first point, I mean, I don't know any other fighter that would do that. Take a fight, 2-3 weeks down the line from a world title fight against one of the best to do it, GSP. If you look up alpha in the dictionary, probably a picture of Michael Bisping next to it. I mean, he's a proper, as we say in the UK, hard nut. Yeah, a proper tough guy. I mean, you know, it's one of the things that he does. You know, Michael weren't gonna tap out when GSP locked him in. He just knew he wouldn't tap out, and his face was busted up. I think the fight was actually a lot closer than people thought.
It was. I remember when, after the first round, I actually tweeted how this is probably the best GSP I've ever seen after the first round. Right. Then the second round comes in, and you can tell all of that muscle, all of that bulking up started getting to him, and it affected his cardio, and he started slowing down.
Part of the GSP one aside, because that's worth a discussion in itself, but I thought Bisping started to come into it in the second round, and you know, he spent a lot of time on the ground, right, on his back, but he was putting in some serious work from his back. He was cutting up GSP with the elbows. There was some punishing work going on there, and it was a lot closer than I thought. But like you say, to now head off to Shanghai 3 weeks later to take this fight, it's commendable for him.
But when it comes to fighter safety, though, don't you think that Bisping should think a little bit about life after fighting? I think,
you know what? I think that's probably part of the reason he's taking this fight. I think he's actually said that there's an event in London in March next year, which I think
that's going to be the last one.
That's his retirement fight. So for him, I think it's a question of now, this is the penultimate one, and then sign off on a high. He's got some stuff going on outside the sport now. He's got into the Triple X film. He's got he's doing some broadcast work as well. So he's preparing himself well now for the after career responsibilities that he'll have. But a fight is a fight at the end of the day. This guy's proved it through Cage Warriors, Cage Rage, and into UFC.
He's been there from the beginning.
Proper hard guy. You know what? And to do it all clean, widely regarded as being one of the cleanest athletes there. Utmost respect for him.
And we're going to talk about that a bit later, the whole USADA and how that's changed the game. But one thing that kind of disappointed me when I saw him taking this fight against Gastelum is it's probably we're never going to see him fight Yoel Romero. And the trash talk between them has been incredible.
This sport is so crazy. I mean, like going back to what you're saying about GSP. This guy walked away in his prime at 32, and you walk away at 32 when you're just about hitting the apex of your skills, and then to take 4 years out and come back from that.
I think it goes back to the point you made earlier about how it's 90% mental than physical. And you can tell after the Johnny Hendricks fight with GSP, the last fight that he fought, mentally he wasn't into it anymore. So I think he made the right decision to step away.
Totally.
But I didn't expect him to come back looking that good.
He looked amazing. I mean, obviously 4 years out, the ring rust, the cardio started to show in the second, the conditioning started to show in the second round onwards, but physically looked immense. And, the big question was, would he look any better than the GSP of 4 years ago? And I think he did. Bigger, the skill sets was ridiculous. This guy was training with Gary Tonin, BJJ, grappling beast, and then going and boxing under Freddie Roach. So his training was ridiculous for this one.
And I was following his Instagram and his social media throughout, and you can tell throughout these 4 years he's never stopped training. And I think that's the key part. He didn't kind of step away from the sport completely. He just kept kind of toning his skills. He kept training. He
kept learning, and that's the hallmark of a great martial artist. It's the pursuit for continual growth and learning, because martial arts is a long time. It's a lifetime journey. There's a spirituality about it. You're never at the top of it. If you think you're at the top of the martial arts business, you're not, because it's a lifelong pursuit for spiritual excellence, personal excellence, and physical excellence. And GSP's proved it. So to answer your point about Bisping, if the attraction is big enough, who knows? Right. Who knows? We have to see what happens with Yoel Romero first, but you never know. You might see him again.
What should GSP do right now? Should he stay at middleweight? Should he go down to welterweight and try to win the championship there?
It's a good question. I think the boys at middleweight are big.
Yeah.
Too big for him. You can tell the size.
Whittaker is young. He's great. When he comes back from his injury.
Fighter. Really is an immense fighter. I think he's a horrible fight for anybody, right? So my personal view is I think he should boil down and get back to welterweight. And there's obviously the Woodley fight to have there. I don't know if Woodley Diaz gets made in the interim period. Yeah. That could be interesting. I think that might happen.
Diaz has been asking for a lot of money. But honestly, I don't know, maybe I'm a bit biased because I actually went to Vegas to watch him fight Conor.
Yeah.
I think he should get paid. I mean, he's being picky. He's not taking all the fights.
He got paid for the two Conor fights.
But he's paid his dues. He's been the guy who's... yes, he's got a lot of losses on his record, but he's entertainment. People, he'll be more of a pay-per-view attraction.
Let me throw this out to you, hypothetically.
Yeah.
Diaz... Woodley happens at welterweight. Ferguson, McGregor, lightweight. McGregor wins. Let's talk about that one, but I don't think it's that easy. Say Diaz beats Woodley to become the welterweight champion. McGregor, Diaz 3 for the welterweight belt. Conor, a 3-weight world champion.
That would be incredible. I mean, now, for me,
just to see the sunset.
To see a Diaz brother as a champion, that's entertaining enough. But to see the whole build-up with Conor as well, again...
3-weight world champion.
It would be incredible. It would be incredible.
But look, I think GSP back at welterweight, it's an interesting division, that one. Obviously, Colby Covington's been speaking a lot.
Yeah.
And he's in the mix now. I think he's probably talked himself into a number of fights.
Right.
But he's probably talked
heavyweight, maybe above his weight class. He just got a boomerang to the head a couple of days ago.
Honestly, that was insane. I mean, Fabricio shouldn't be picking on little guys anyway.
Yeah.
He did it with Tony Ferguson at the last event. You saw that one with Tony Ferguson?
I didn't see that. They
got into it at the last event where Tony threatened to ankle pick him.
Oh, wow.
That didn't go down too well. And then he's picking up. I mean, Colby's... I think a lot of people have seen what Conor's done with the whole art of trash talk.
And everyone's trying to follow that blueprint.
They all want to be the baddest trash talker now in the game. And there's a fine line, right?
I mean, to insult the whole country of Brazil, which is basically the heart of MMA. I think it was a bit stupid. It was over the line. And it didn't do him any favors. And this one I can understand because Brazilian people are very proud. So it doesn't matter what the size difference it is.
Bro, you're 265 pounds and this guy's 155 and you hit him with a boomerang. You know,
It was funny.
just scold him like you'd scold a young child. But
He
don't
might
hit
get
him
an
with a
assault
boomerang.
charge against him. I think it's gone to the
I think
police.
Colby's saying he punched him as well.
Oh, really? Okay. Wow.
It's a boomerang and a punch. So, so he's at the welterweight in the mix as well now with all that. So there's a few good fights at welterweight. But GSP, I think, should go down.
So you get a lot of...
Tyrone needs to be pushed. Needs to come out.
Yeah.
See, I mean, I think Tyrone Woodley's an incredibly big fighter. Great striker. Great wrestling skills as well. I just think he needs that fight to bring it out of him. Do you know what I mean?
A lot of people gave him flack for
defining
the way
fight.
that he approached the Wonder Boy fight. But
I thought the first fight was a good one. The second one was
it was a bit
of a anticlimax.
exactly.
really.
But I wouldn't really blame him because if you look at Wonder Boy, he's incredible. Nobody wants to go toe to toe and strike with that guy.
Yeah.
So he had to
His
kind of take a
karate
more
skills are ridiculous. Yeah.
It's incredible. So I think Woodley, and he's been complaining a lot as well about the way that he's being promoted. He's not being treated the way a champion should be treated. He tried to take a bit of a racism spin on it, which didn't work because there's been, African American champions all across all weight classes
I don't
in the
think
UFC.
that's the case. I mean, I think for the paymasters that run the UFC, it purely is about digits and sales. And unfortunately, his last 2 or 3 fights haven't really inspired a whole bunch of interest, and they've been pretty anticlimactic, to be honest. So I think Dana's interest and the UFC's interest is to put on dynamic, electrifying fights that have people jumping off their seats and people buying the pay-per-views. I think they did all right with GSP and Bisping. I think that was just under 1 million buys from what I understand, which they needed. But even that, to be honest, it's a crazy card. 217 was a crazy card.
One of the best cards I've ever seen.
And it gives you a sense of perspective in terms of what not only the cycle, the economy and the sport is in now, but also how much they're missing McGregor. McGregor will do north of 1.5.
He's got the whole of Ireland watching anyways. That's enough.
So it gives you a sense of perspective that, such a stacked card, which probably the best card of the year by some distance, right?
For sure.
It's still just about cracked 1 million buys.
And I think GSP is not the only champion that has a decision now on which weight class he should fight in. TJ just beat Cody Garbrandt. There's a lot of bad blood, and he's been calling out Mighty Mouse. So do you think that TJ should make that move down one weight? I think 125 and try and fight.
It's a super fight. It's definitely a super fight. I mean, Mighty Mouse is on his own at that
He's cleaned that division completely.
Cleaned the division out. His skill set is amazing. He's an incredibly fluent all-round fighter. His skill set's untouchable.
Where do you think he falls in the all-time great discussion?
Yeah, he needs to be up he's in the conversation. He's definitely in the conversation. I think the only thing that may impair him being number one is the weight category, unfortunately.
Yeah.
The glamour weights are higher up, right? And that's the problem. So I think, a TJ Dillashaw, Mighty Mouse fight might get the interest levels up because it'll be interesting. I thought TJ looked amazing against Cody. Light on his feet. He looked like a really fresh fighter.
Should Cody get an immediate rematch or should he work his way back up?
It's a good question, because you got Dominic Cruz.
Yeah, he just broke his arm.
He broke his arm, but I'm sure that arm wants to heal quickly because I'm sure he wants to get his hands on TJ.
Absolutely.
And that belt again. So it's a stacked next 2 or 3 fights that they could put on at that weight. Cody, probably. I think probably. I said it to a lot of my friends leading up to the fight that I thought Cody was going to lose and Joanna was going to lose because they didn't look right. Cody looked way too emotionally attached to the whole beef that he had with TJ that it took him off.
Those UFC embedded clips that come out before the fight gives you a lot of insight into the mentality of the fighter.
They were wrong.
Yeah.
Both of them were wrong for different reasons. Cody way too attached emotionally, let it all get on top of him to the point. When you really dislike someone that much, it takes your focus of what you're supposed to do. He came off the injury and he just looked totally gone. And TJ was relaxed and calm. Even at the weigh-in, it just looked like Cody. You need to distance yourself.
You
mentally
got to his head,
get back to the game plan. And Joanna talking smack the way the way she was with Rose.
And talking about being undefeated for the rest of her career.
Yeah,
and
they shouldn't do that, you know. They started doing all this stuff with Ronda when she was smashing people up. And Conor even right before the
For
fight
Nate
with
Diaz,
Diaz. Just do what you do and do it well. I mean, you know, you don't need to sell tickets and try and become like McGregor and smack talk your way into it. So Joanna, again, I didn't think she was saying some crazy things all the way to lead up to the fight. And what was it? The boogeyman's coming.
Boogie woman.
Boogie woman's coming.
You know what was scarier than the
Rose.
boogie woman? It was Rose's face. She was dead in the eyes.
Man, they had I don't know which thing I was watching, but they had a camera, a microphone. When they were kicking off, and Johanna was, I think it's at the weigh-in.
At the weigh-ins, yeah.
And she was, obviously talking a lot of rubbish. Then all you could hear Rose saying was the Lord's Prayer. And that's like
she was whispering something.
It was the Lord's Prayer. It was a prayer, and that's like some carry stuff, man. It's like you're going to get scared from that.
Exactly.
That's like the old-time Hammer horror films from the 80s. Holy smoke, this one was crazy, man. But she was amazing. She was clinical. I mean, what a performance by Rose as well.
And I think Joanna will get an immediate rematch. She's been that kind of a champion that even Dana White has been saying she's been a good champion for the UFC.
She has, and she went on an incredible run. So she's in a mix for a rematch. Jessica Andrade is obviously there and would probably, she had a good fight with Joanna, which went to points, I believe. So she's in the mix, but they don't have that many more at that weight for the females, right? So I think Rose and Joanna probably make sense. But I was very impressed with Namajunas. I thought, the way she conducted herself professionally. Great performance in the cage. She came out with a lot of credit, I thought.
The post-fight speech also, I think, got her a lot more fans as well.
Bit like who was the other one after? Dustin Poirier and same sort of thing. Level-headed guy. Great fight with Anthony Pettis. Really, really great fight. And again, he made the comment, I don't have to talk rubbish.
I'll just let the fights.
You just put people in front of me. I'll keep boiling them over. And he's now put himself into that Shark Tank at lightweight.
He's back into it, and he's been around for a while. He's one of those fighters that
I thought he looked brilliant. I thought that was a
very convincing
That was
win.
a brutal fight with Pettis. That was gory. That was a brutal fight. But he's in that Shark Tank now at lightweight.
Yeah.
McGregor, Ferguson, Poirier, and Alvarez.
I think Conor has a lot of reasons to be worried, right? Because there's a lot of really good fighters in the division there, whether he wants to go down to 155.
It's a ridiculous division. It's brilliant. Yeah. I do hope McGregor-Ferguson gets made for different reasons. You're talking... I mean, they're stablemates. I don't know if many people know that, but they're stablemates. They're in the same management company. Okay. In fact, even going back to Shanghai... There's the co-main event is a Chinese superstar, the Leech, Li Jingliang, who's also from the same stable at lightweight.
Wow.
Also at lightweight. So, my brothers at Paradigm Sports Management are stacked at the lightweight division, but nothing wrong with a bit of sibling rivalry.
Yeah, it's good for business, I guess. You get both sides of the card.
I'd love to see Conor and Tony. Yeah. I'm a big Tony Ferguson fan. I just think this guy's skill set, he's very unorthodox.
Do you think he beats Conor?
I think it's a horribly dangerous fight for either one. Conor, striking, his distance management, footwork as a striker is incredible. The counter punching, the power he carries with that left hand. Tony fights open. He leaves his chin up and he takes shots. But, what Tony has is incredible stamina. But
that's one of the weaknesses of Conor, I guess, is stamina.
He can go for, I don't know, he can go forever, Ferguson. But not just that, his pattern recognition, the 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu camp, Eddie Bravo, he does some crazy, crazy moves. I don't know if you watch this guy, but it's beautiful to watch. It's like he's breakdancing in the cage. His moves are so fluid. Right. It's actually like he couples dancing and breakdancing moves into his maneuvers. He looks so fluid, but he has a great way of understanding body patterns, adjusting himself. His footwork is immense, and on the floor, on the canvas, he puts in serious work. He what he done to who was the guy again? The Motown boy. We'll come back to it.
Yeah, we'll come back to it. I'll remember.
He talked a lot before the fight that he got put away. Yeah, he got put away for the interim belt. But a lot of that work was off Ferguson's back. Just like we were talking about Bisping working off his back with the elbows.
So that brings me to another thing, because we didn't get the chance to see how that round would have been scored, because obviously GSP ended the fight. But one of the things that we've seen in the MMA sport right now is the judges and the way that they score the fight. So a lot of people don't get enough credit for working off their back and the work that they do off their back. So it would have been interesting to see how they would have scored that against GSP.
Let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
When was the last time you were up in arms, in uproar on a decision in MMA?
It's been a while. I mean...
Which one did you disagree with? Protested?
I can't remember. Yeah,
right, now let me flip it.
I remember the feeling.
When was the last time you were in uproar on a decision in boxing?
Oh, very easy.
There you go.
The whole Canelo thing with the judge with the, what is it? The 118, 110 score. Unbelievable.
So I think the referees and judges get it a little bit of a hard time in MMA. I think
Kevin Lee is the last person.
Kevin Lee, the Motown guy. I think they're underestimated. They do a pretty fine job compared to what we see in the cousin promotions in boxing, where I've frequently left scratching my head with some of the decisions and scoring in boxing. And it shouldn't be that way. It should not be. Boxing's been going on for 100 years.
I mean, I had a rant about that in a previous podcast. It's just the corruption. It's just corrupt and incompetent. it's everything put together.
It's all those mixed up.
Well, speaking of corruption, one of the things that I think the UFC has done a great job at is also trying to crack down on performance-enhancing drugs and human growth hormones and all that kind of stuff. So USADA has come in and completely changed the game. You've seen a lot of fighters that used to be fantastic pre-USADA, and then you see a complete different look, different performance post-USADA. One of those has to be Johnny Hendricks, because when he fought GSP 4 years ago, I was becoming one of his biggest fans. And as soon as USADA came in, you just see it's like a different person in the octagon. He's lost, I don't know, the edge. He's lost the spark in his punches. Physically, he doesn't look the same. Vitor Belfort is another one who you've seen a lot of the, before and after picture. Chris Weidman as well. I don't know if it's anything to do with USADA, but I'm just saying there's a bit of a trend. I mean, Chris Weidman pre-USADA and post-USADA is different. Bigfoot Silva, Frank Mir, but those are kind of at the tail end of their careers. And now we just heard of Anderson Silva. Yeah. How much do you think the whole Anderson Silva situation right now, how much does it hurt his legacy? Because he was considered the greatest of all time, hands down.
John Jones and these guys, right? Anderson Silva. I think it hurts it. I really do. I mean, I always believe in the purity of competition, whether it's in a cage or a ring or in the corporate world, right? I just feel that the margins between victory and defeat are so thin.
Especially in MMA.
Especially in MMA. Yeah, anything in life, though, to be fair, Mohammed. Anything in life, the margins between success and failure are very thin. And, the way to approach life and sports in general is through integrity. You work hard. You try your best to win legitimately. Right? So for me, these guys that have been caught and have done this stuff, I feel their legacies are tarnished. I'm sorry, I do. Because how much credence, how much value can I give to your perceived past successes when I know you've been taking an unfair advantage over your opponents, regardless of how naturally talented you might have been in the case, for example, of John Jones. Naturally talented,
easily the most gifted fighter ever.
Yeah, but
natural talent.
Many people still have a question mark. The Cormier fight, a few times he went into wars. If he was fighting legitimately, would he have won some of those or not? I don't know.
You never know.
And that question mark is always going to remain, right? So for me, USADA was absolutely required. Some form of quarantine, some form of, rule set to just make this more of an even playing field where, really the best martial artist or mixed martial artist or combat fighter wins purely on merit, rather than because of an unfair advantage they've got over their opponent. And
like you said, it raises a question for their whole legacy, their whole past fights. How many of those fights were they on something? Yeah. And I've got a list in front of me of the fighters that have been suspended. So in 2016, BJ Penn, Tim Means, Yoel Romero, Diego Brandao, all of those got
These are big
got
names,
suspended.
man.
Right now, we've got obviously Frank Mir, who got busted for the same drug as John Jones, Turinabol or whatever that is.
He's off to Bellator now, isn't he?
Yeah, Lyoto Machida, Chad Mendes, John Jones, Brock Lesnar. But I mean, Brock Lesnar, you can just look at him and tell. Another fighter who's fighting in the upcoming pay-per-view is Cyborg, and she's been done for quite a few of those. But then again, she's one of those people, you look at her and you're like, she must be on something. There's no way.
Era, not just look. The voice as well.
And the voice and her face and the whole thing.
So look, it's needed. You need a corrective policy in the sport now, just to get everyone on an relatively equal playing field. Shanghai, the heavyweight got caught there. James Mulheron got tested for USDA and failed, so he's been pulled from the card. So it's good to see that it's been put into place, and I know it's a pretty aggressive way of testing. They follow these fellas around all over the world, no matter where they are. Off season, post season, training, post training.
Oh, you have to disclose where you are all the time.
All the time.
Yeah.
So you can't cheat the system. So I think they got it right on that one. The next one now for me that needs to be solved is weight cutting, and getting into a universal rule or agreement on, again, preserving the safety of the fighter, but having strict weight cutting and weight conditioning procedures in place. That's the next thing that the sport needs to address.
And that is, I think, one of the most dangerous things, because Khabib, for example, when he had to pull out of his fight with, I think, Tony Ferguson.
It's Tony for the third time.
Yeah. They were saying that his liver stopped working for a little bit. It was that dangerous.
Yeah.
I mean, it's weight cut, and you hear Joe Rogan talk about it all the time.
Right,
it's the biggest problem that they're facing right now. What do you think the solution to something like that would be? To stop people from fighting in weight classes that are clearly below their natural weight, or to have the waiting, I don't know, the day of the fight or 2 days before the fight and let them
I think
bulk up again?
There's a number. I mean, we discussed this a lot in my previous promotion and some of the work I'm doing now with the fighters. I mean, you ask the fighter, they'll say put on more weight categories for us, and that prevents it. It's preventative, right?
Yeah.
But how feasible is that to have? You go down the whole boxing route. Super welter, light welter. You got three weight classes.
You don't want that
for one division, right? I don't think you're going to go down that route. So you got that element of it. Maybe putting the weigh-in on the morning of the fight, and it stops that 48-hour, 24-hour rehydration or whatever the case may be that happens. Monthly testing. So I don't think it happens as much in the MMA. I've been around a lot of these fighters. They don't really blow up as much as the boxers did.
Yeah.
If you remember very famous English fighter, Ricky Hatton.
Yes.
In between fights, he looks like two different human beings. Right?
Yeah.
So
it looks like he's in a fat suit,
So that doesn't happen as much in MMA because of the sheer physicality of the sport. If you're a martial artist, you're practicing it regularly, and martial arts is a very physically demanding sport. So they don't balloon as much, but it's still. I think I know many fighters that in lead up to the weigh-in are trying to cut 10, 15 kilos in a week of the fight, and that's just not right.
Yeah,
that's a huge weight drop. And then if you imagine cutting that just for the weigh-in and putting it back on overnight, it's your body's not conditioned to do that kind of stuff.
And you're not going into the fight in peak physical condition either, because
you got a weight advantage, but you're the fatigue and all the damage it's done. It's just something that needs some form of governing policy around that too.
All right. So what we'll do is we'll wrap this segment up with that. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit about UFC 218. We've got Max Holloway versus Jose Aldo. Very exciting. Cyborg, Holly Holm, obviously are on the pay-per-view as well. So we'll talk about that when we get back.
Good stuff.
You're listening to the Sports Unhinged podcast.
Welcome back. This is Sports Unhinged. We've got Saul with us today for an MMA special. Let's talk a little bit about the upcoming UFC 218. Now, I got mixed up before the break. I think the Cyborg Holly Holm is in the one in New Year's. It's 320.
Right.
319, I think.
Yeah.
So we've got 318 coming up right now. We've got
You're
Aldo.
jumping 100 ahead, 218.
Yeah, 218. Goodness gracious. So yeah, we've got Aldo versus...
might be around in 318.
Yeah, 318. Imagine what the UFC or the sport would be like right then. It would be awesome. So we've got Jose Aldo. Obviously, he took the fight on short notice because Frankie Edgar went down, and he's fighting Max Holloway. So it's a chance for him to get back on, to get the championship back and get back in the winning streak. Because since the Conor fight, he hasn't been right. He hasn't been 100% there.
It's been sad to see what he's been like since then. I think this is one last roll of the dice for me from Aldo. I mean, I thought Max Holloway was brilliant in that fight with him last time. You know, it was I think a TKO in the third round, but he put a beating on Aldo, a proper beating.
Yeah.
Holloway is a dangerous guy, man. He's 25 years old. I think the kid's 18 and 3, and he just seems to be improving fight upon fight as a martial artist. You know, a bona fide world champion. He deserves to be holding that belt. And I don't think it's a good fight for Aldo. I think it's going to end. I think,
and he's taking it on short notice as well.
I think it ends even quicker this time.
Yeah, because and this is the question now. What does Jose Aldo do if he loses this fight?
And you should stop, you know, being bitter about the McGregor fight.
Yeah,
you know, that's the thing that's really disappointed me is that you give the guy credit. He knocked you out like he said he would.
Yeah,
and he actually practiced
in 13 seconds
in the dressing room before he threw it.
Right.
You know? So, you know, just he's been on this thing. Like, he reminds me of Paulie Malignaggi.
Yeah,
they go on and on. Just let it go. Let it go. You know, you should be a bigger person than this. And he spent 2 years now,
and he hasn't been able to get back.
He can't get it out of his system. So that can impact you as a professional too. So I think this fight's a bad fight for him, and I think it ends quicker.
Should he consider moving down to 135?
You pack it in.
You think so?
Yeah.
Because he's smaller than Cruz. He's probably the same height as Cody Garbrandt.
Yeah.
But the only problem that I think he would face there, because he looked pretty bulked up. He looked big in the last fight against Holloway. I think he'd have a problem just making the weight. Otherwise, it would be exciting to see him go down, you know?
Cody, you know, concussive puncher. That's not a good fight. Dominic Cruz isn't a good fight. TJ's not a good fight. It's just, it's another territory where he's going into deep waters, and it's not, you know, these guys don't get any older. They're getting better, and they're still young fellas, some of these, you know. I don't know. It's not a good fight, this one.
Maybe, like you said, you should probably pack it in if it doesn't work out.
One last throw of the dice. I mean, I think what determines whether he carries on is the quality of the performance. If he's competitive and he makes a competitive fight, then obviously the guy will carry on. But Holloway is a beast.
I know the fight that you're more excited about on that card is your guy, Alistair Overeem against Ngannou, the Reem. Now, you actually know Alistair Overeem very well. We had a chance. You got us a couple of kind of boxing coaching lessons with his stand-up coach, Benji.
My man Benji,
So that was fun. What do you think that fight will be like? Because Ngannou is one of those guys that everybody's scared of. I mean, he's just been knocking everybody out. Yeah. But an argument could be made that he's never been tested against someone the caliber of Alistair Overeem.
That's the big question, right? It's a bit like Freddy Krueger. Everyone was scared of him until the film switched.
Yeah.
Freddy wasn't really real. It didn't exist anymore. Nganou's had an incredible run, a dangerous puncher. You know,
it will be a striking battle. You know that for sure.
Yeah, but you know, that's his skill set. He throws heat with either hand. But you know, Reem, Alistair's a different proposition. You know, he's being completely impartial.
Yeah.
You know, Dream World Champion.
Yeah.
Strike Force World Champion. K1 World Champion. You know, proven. Yeah. And the only thing missing is the UFC belt. And he was only here a couple of months ago. So before he went to camp, he was there actually the day he announced he's fighting Francis.
Really?
I was actually with Alistair just before he announced it. And I can tell you, it's a fight he's wanted for a year. You know, Francis started calling him out over a year ago, just before Alistair fought Stipe for the title.
Yeah.
And Alistair, at that point, even though he was training for Stipe, said, I'm going to fight Francis. And everyone was saying, what do you want to do that for? This is the boogeyman, right? This is
right. Everyone's trying to avoid it.
And he said because he doesn't know this full depth and the range of martial arts. You know, Alistair, kickboxing base, you know, the knees are still the most horrible knees in the heavyweight division, as Mark Hunt will testify.
And if you look at Francis's track record, the most notable fighter he's ever fought was Arlovsky, who's been kind of on the downhill of his career.
So I'm glad Andre won last week because he was on a 5-fight slide up until that point. And, you know, what do? You kind of compare. So Francis fought Arlovsky. I think it was the first round, that one, right?
Yes, I think so.
And Alistair knocked him out, I think, at the end of the first or early second. So
it was a first-round knockout, against Arlovsky.
Right. So they both performed relatively well against a mutual opponent. So that's one thing you can tick off is, you know, stylistically, how would this look?
Yeah.
It's you're right. It's a striking showdown. I just think Alistair's just way too deep in his skill set.
And he's got a lot to prove. The last 2 fights that he's had since he's lost to Stipe, the Mark Hunt.
Yeah.
Not an easy fight at all. And Verdum, who's one of the most decorated
Verdum without his boomerang.
Yeah. So, him and his boomerang. So
without the boomerang. So
it was the majority
decision. It was a
decision.
fair fight, that one. That was a tough fight. That could have gone either way with Verdum, the trilogy fight with them two. But, you know, he didn't need to take this fight. And I remember saying to him, you know, beating Verdum, he's now number 1. He's ranked number 1 in the heavyweight division. It shows you a lot about the caliber of the fighter and the competitor that he's willing to put that number 1 ranking at risk against someone like Francis.
Because if he gets that, he'll definitely get a title shot again.
I think he has to. And I think he was so close against Stipe. It was literally a split second where I thought he'd submitted him. He knocked him down, if you remember, with the overhand left, and he was on the floor, and I thought, whoa, he's done it.
And then it just turned around.
Then he turned around after that. But he was so close. He was so close. I think there's unfinished business there. And I know Alistair is not looking at stopping until he gets that UFC belt, because that
it's the only thing missing from his.
And then you got to look. You talked earlier on about GSP and Bisping, about where they rank in the greatest, you know, the Hall of Fames, if you will, and that, all the post-career analysis that's done. And Overeem's in that conversation. Yeah. If he wins a UFC heavyweight belt, like I say, Dream, Strikeforce, K1, UFC belt, it's undeniable.
It's awesome. The other pay-per-view that's coming afterwards, obviously we've got Cyborg and Holly Holm.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
And I've always described people that fight against Cyborg
crazy.
I've kind of like it, you know, that scene in Jurassic Park where they take, I don't know, is it the cow or the buffalo, and they bring it down to the Tyrannosaurus Rex to eat? Yeah. That's what it looks like every time someone fights Cyborg. I'm a bit worried about Holly Holm because she's another one since the she lost the belt.
Or Miesha Tate.
With Miesha Tate, she went 3 straight losing. She couldn't get a win. And it's kind of a similar situation to Jose Aldo, where you just can't get mentally there. It was nice to see her win the last fight.
Exactly. I was there in Singapore for that one, and I remember the first round against Beth Correa, who's the pit bull, right? Beth Correa, another Brazilian fighter. And she's quite a menacing lady herself.
She is,
Correa, but first round was terrible, to a point where Singaporeans are normally quite placid people, but they were booing. It was that bad. Yeah. The first round was, but then in the second round she connected, and the finish was brutal. And that was classical Holly Holm, who's got that brilliant boxing base and so on, right? So that would give her some confidence. And as a striker, she would have that confidence against anyone, regardless of who they are, right? So I think it's an intriguing fight. And you know what? I'm actually going for a shock here. I think Holly shocks everyone.
I hope so. I hope so.
And stops Cyborg.
Yeah. I think she's more of a worthy champion. She acts like a champion.
Yeah, she's grace, and you know, she carries herself.
I always have that question mark against Cyborg. I don't know, with the whole.
I like her. I mean, I like her, but
it's just, I don't know.
Yeah.
I just use the eye test, and I can tell something's wrong there. Let's take a bit of a left turn and just wrap it up now with a bit of boxing. Obviously, the most exciting fighter right now, or the only exciting fighter, is Anthony Joshua. And we've seen Deontay Wilder knock out a guy that just came off the couch after 2 years out, and he won in the first round. And this is the thing about boxing, which makes it less appealing to a lot of the people that are not boxing purists, so a lot of the combat sports fans, is because fighters keep fighting nobodies to stack up their records. So Deontay Wilder is 38-0, but if you look at his last, 10 opponents, no one is ranked more than 24th. The guy he just fought was unranked.
Yeah.
I mean, there are about, over 3,000 ranked heavyweight fighters in the world. And these guys keep ducking each other and fighting the 325th, the 136th ranked guy. Look,
you're 100% right to sort of look at that. I mean, it's been there in boxing for many, many years, right? I mean, even my idol, Mike Tyson, if you look at his first 20 fights, you'd be hard pressed now to even remembering who they were, but even knowing if they had a record of any description, they were, but it's part of the learning experience. It's part of the makeup of a boxer. You have to go through that. Anthony Joshua's been through that as well.
Right. Yeah, he has. I mean, he was fighting plumbers and electricians up until...
It's an unfortunate part, but they've got to learn their trade somewhere, because sparring versus a live fight are two separate things. And that's where you see the differences in MMA, where the fights are genuinely tough. You know, they could be 50-50 fights each time.
And no one is undefeated for long.
I think it's pretty much impossible.
Yeah.
To go undefeated in MMA. It really is. I mean, because there's just so many different tools and weapons, physical weapons coming at you from every angle, head, knees, elbows, hands, feet. It's just so hard to do it. And, you know, I have nothing but utmost respect for these fighters who are sitting there with you know, near enough unblemished records. With boxing, you can kind of get away with it for a bit longer. Because
with MMA, you can always switch strategies.
You can run your way to 50-0, for example.
Yeah. And I think Anthony Joshua, I started respecting his game a bit more when he started going up against some tougher fighters. And it started with the Dylan White. There was a bit of kind of back and forth between them. Then Charles Martin, who was undefeated, he was a champion. Yes, he wasn't that great, or he made it look too easy when he knocked him out. Dominic Brazil, the same thing, Eric Molina. But it had to be the Klitschko fight. That's where we really saw what Anthony Joshua is made of. He was knocked down. He came back. Klitschko, for his age, looked superhuman. And it was just one of the most exciting boxing fights that I've seen in a long, long time. But now, obviously, everybody's asking for that Deontay Wilder versus Anthony Joshua fight. I don't think it won't be a contest at all.
Why'd you say that?
I think Joshua knocks him out very easily, because if you look at Deontay Wilder's record, 39-0 with 38 knockouts, he hasn't fought anybody worth mentioning. And when you see him fight, the way that he swings his arms like he's in some kind of street fight, it's not boxing. You get to the point where you're just swinging for the fences. Joshua's going to see those coming a mile away. Because the only thing that Joshua is a very technical fighter. The only problem he has is his stamina. You can see him gassing out very easily.
Yeah.
But from a technical point of view and the power that he has, I think he catches Wilder very early on. I think it's over in three or four rounds.
There's a couple of things with that one, right? So I don't think that fight gets made anytime soon.
Yeah.
My personal view. I think what may happen is they might go down the route of another big domestic tear-up in the UK. Tyson Fury needs to get down off 40 stone.
It'll be nice.
Come back into fighting weight. But I think
it'll be nice to see him back. I mean, he's one of those guys that's I've always been a fan.
He's still holding an O record, right?
Yeah,
remember? I mean, but he's I don't know, 40, 45 stone, whatever he's done. But he needs to come back to fighting weight. He wants to come back to fighting weight now, right? Yeah. So I think that would be a good domestic tear-up, which will do really well in terms of business and credibility for both fighters. Whoever wins that one, you know, it's a big name to have and a legitimate name to have in your record. Then the unification fight with Wilder. So, you know, AJ, Anthony Joshua, what's not to like about the guy, right? He conducts himself like a professional. He's a management person's dream.
Yeah,
you know, he carries himself brilliantly. Sponsors are falling over this guy. Broadcasters are falling over this guy. I mean, the world really is his oyster.
Ticks all the boxes.
He does. Yeah. But you're right to raise the question mark, because sometimes when I look at him, and he's a physical specimen, right? Just like that you probably don't even remember the guy, but Frank Bruno, going back many years ago. Physical specimen, but a very rigid European style of boxing. And obviously AJ is in a slightly different place compared to Big Frank, right? But Frank was very rigid, very upright. And, you know, when it came to the very top level, Tyson, Bone Crusher Smith, and I think Tim Witherspoon stopped him when it really counted. AJ's a little bit more fluid than that. And you're right, to come off the canvas against someone like Klitschko, he showed a lot of heart. But he, you know, again, the question mark is the guy was 40 years old, had been out the ring for 2 years. So it didn't take away all the questions. My point is on AJ, but it went a long way to showing you how good this guy could be. I think, you know, he's still a young, very young guy, both in terms of age and in terms of his experience. I mean, he can be as good as he wants to be. And I think the fight with Wilder, it's heavyweights though, right? So
anything could happen, right?
And you're right. Wilder is wild. He swings these missiles from every
It's almost funny to watch. I mean, with the way that he swings them.
I mean, you go by comparisons. And they've had, I think Dominic Breazeale's talking himself into a fight with Wilder. That's going to be a mutual opponent.
Oh, that would be a good fight. It will give you a kind of a barometer.
It will give you some form of barometer as to how that goes. And I think a lot of people are recounting a spar that Wilder had with David Haye, where Haye smashed him in sparring. And that gives you, again, a sense of perspective that AJ against Haye, I think I like David a lot, but that fight doesn't last long.
Yeah,
But that kind of fighter, you know, AJ has a similar type. He bangs hard. He's fluid. I think it's a tough one.
I'm a bit tired of Haye. I'm tired of his trash talk. I'm tired of, I mean, him, Chisora, and all, they all deserve each other. I don't think they're at the same level as
has kind
AJ.
of achieved something though, right? He's done really well at cruiserweight. You know, heavyweight, very credible career in heavyweight. Del Boy was probably more active in the press conferences,
right,
and the weigh-ins than he was in the actual fights.
Right.
You know, he's great.
He's good at selling the fight.
He's great at you know, starting nonsense and getting into brawls with people outside of the fights. But Haye, I think, has got one big fight left in him.
Yeah.
And whether that's going to be the Bellew 2 fight, that'll be it. But I don't think Joshua's the right route for him. I think
he's not the right route for anyone.
No. So I'd like to see AJ and Wilder get it together. Probably end of next year, I think. I think they'll try and match up Tyson Fury before that, if they can, and set up the big unification fight at the end of the year. And I think it's a lot closer than people think, but I think AJ probably stops him in about 5 or 6 rounds.
Excellent. Now we've hit the hour, so before I let you go,
I mentioned Arsenal beating Tottenham again.
We started with Arsenal. I'll go back and we'll wrap up with Arsenal. What do you think? How well do they do for the rest of the season?
Look,
You're 6th now.
I'm smiling because I don't have any expectations. You know, I went into the last 12 years with no expectations. So, you know, for me, success this year is
making it to the Champions League.
It's going to be top 4.
Top 4.
Winning the Europa League would constitute success this year.
Definitely.
But the club won't get to the position I feel, and many people feel Arsenal should be at the top table of the European circuit, not at this level. It won't happen until Arsene decides to move.
Manchester City are looking unstoppable right now.
Yeah, that's a.
I was when I made my preseason predictions in one of the podcasts, and I knew the moment that I was saying it, I would sound very stupid very soon, just because of my hate for the money teams. You know, like the even when Chelsea came up, it started with Chelsea with all the money being pumped in, and now we're seeing that blueprint happen in different clubs. Paris Saint-Germain, for example, Man City. So I predicted that they'll finish 5th outside of Champions League. Wow. I was just hoping that it all comes crashing down and Pep Guardiola gets fired by the middle of the season. It looks like the exact opposite right now.
Pep and these guys, they're modern managers.
Yeah.
You know, he took a season to see what he needed to do. He spent a lot of money, but he recruited
Did get a lot of money, yeah.
But he knew what needed to happen to make that team competitive for the Premier League. And, you know, I think it's going to be difficult to stop these guys. Now,
you think they win it? They win the whole thing?
The Premier League?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's going to be who stops them is themselves. which could happen. But my only concern is I don't go to season unbeaten because we want to hold on to that record.
Excellent. All right. So, thanks a lot for coming
Pleasure.
on. Hopefully we'll
Great.
have you on very soon. We'll get some updates on your new sports management agency and how that's doing.
Yeah, so after Shanghai, be a lot of...
What's up next for you?
Well, Shanghai, we've got a couple of fighters. We've obviously got, through partnership, my work with the Paradigm folks, and we've got the Bisping and Li Jingliang, which is big main event and co-main event. I'm also representing a young lady here, fitness lady,
Excellent.
Salma Ismail, which everyone should watch out for. She's been shortlisted as Female Influencer of the Year by Sport 360.
Excellent.
Just been in vogue, really charismatic, fabulously talented lady. And we've got some big plans for Sal. And then MMA, man, we're just growing the sport. We're doing some stuff in Asia. We're going to increasingly be bringing some of the biggest names in MMA, some really big names coming, which I can't tell you now, but in 2018 there's some ridiculous plans that we're working on.
Excellent. We'll look forward to it.
So your listeners should stay tuned because we've got some fantastic personalities coming in, which will be great for the Dubai and the UAE as a whole.
Looking forward to having you back soon, and all the best with all of that.
Thanks, man.
To our listeners, thanks for listening to another episode of Sports Unhinged. Don't forget, you can find us on SoundCloud, iTunes, the Apple Podcast app, Stitcher, Facebook, and YouTube. We'll be back next week. We'll go back to the NFL, the NBA, talk a little bit of football. But we just thought that our MMA fans deserved one full hour dedicated to MMA. Thanks, Az, once again, and we'll see you guys soon.
Take it easy.